You are live.
Thank you. It's 4:30. I'm going to call this meeting of the Judiciary and Law Committee to order. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Standing Committee of the Dunn County Board of Supervisors. My name is Jim Tripp. I chair the committee. Other committee members include Mike Rogers, Carl Vandermeulen, Bob Bauer, Jim Zons, and our supervisor board chair, Dave Bartlett. We also have a number of staff with us tonight, including Chris Korpla, who we don't always see at these meetings. Hi, Chris. Got something in particular in mind today? Except you're still muted, so I can't hear you. You're still muted.
There we go. Sorry.
There.
Just a resolution coming through that's supporting that I need for a grant. So.
All right. The roll call can reflect that all the committee members are present. First order of business is approval of the minutes from the December 28th meeting. You should have gotten those minutes in your packet. I would entertain a motion to approve, and then we can discuss if there's any discussion. I see all kinds of hands waving. I saw Carl wave, and I think I heard Mike say something. Is that right?
You heard me say something, Jim.
Oh, Jim Zahn said something. So Carl moves, Jim seconds. Any corrections, additions, changes to the minutes that we need to make before we approve those? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes from December, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, folks. Public comment. Katie, I didn't see any public comment anywhere. Do we have any?
No, I did not see any either.
Katie's on my board twice here tonight. Did you call in and dial in or what?
I'm through 2 different remote sessions, yes.
Okay, good. No public comment. We'll go right to staff reports then, and we'll take them in the order listed in the agenda, starting with the district attorney, Andrea Nodolf. Andrea, take it away.
Good evening. I don't have a whole lot to report. My overall budget in 2020 evened out. You know, if I was over in other categories, I was under in others. So I think we'll have approximately 11% remaining once we finish bills that are still outstanding from 2020. As I said in my email, we're doing a lot of training. I have a number of new staff members, still our deferred prosecution coordinator, as well as basically a brand new victim witness department. So that's been keeping me busy, as well as a number of trials that are scheduled to start coming up in the next month or so. So there was another issue with the leak roofing, the leak on the roof again. I think they resolved that. I'm looking forward to getting a new roof in 2021. Hopefully that still happens. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot to report. If there's any questions or concerns, I'd be happy to answer any.
Thank you, Andrea. Any questions? Chairman Bartlett, we do have a roof in the budget this year, right?
Yes, we do.
That's what I thought.
We added that towards the end for the whole full building.
Yep, that's what I thought. Good. So Andrea, when that happens, you can keep the buckets and take them right home with you.
All right. I'm trying to invest in a big umbrella if I need that. I can still work here.
Okay. Okay. If you need one, I've got an extra big one.
Thanks.
Anything for Andre regarding District Attorney's Office? Any questions, comments? If not, that was short and sweet, and we'll let you go with that. Thank you.
you.
Emergency Management and 911. Do I see? Yeah, Melissa's here. Melissa, do you want to take this?
Sure. Emergency management, I just want to say that we got information from the state saying that our grant that we were working on with Menominee Fire for hazard material equipment was approved, and the check is in the mail. Menominee Fire has the equipment that they had wanted, and so we're going to finalize that here hopefully by the end of the week. So that's taken care of for emergency management. And other than that, just working on PPE and things, with COVID and things like that. We are working with Chris Corpola and Stepping Stones with some funding for, or trying to get funding for sheltering for the homeless population that we have in Dunn County. So that, and like I said, PPE and possibly any help that emergency management can give public health at this time for their vaccine rollout too. So that's kind of our focus. Any questions? Okay. Emergency communications, as I mentioned in my written report, we have purchased new furniture, so that's supposed to be delivered next week. So that'll be a really busy week for us to install that. We'll have to coordinate with our radio vendor, our phone vendors, and IT, which they're very graciously going to help us take a couple of the consoles down at a time while they rebuild those. And so it'll be awkward in kind of working off some of our backup equipment that we have while we install that. But other than that, hopefully by next week, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll have that all done. So that's about all I have at this time.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions or comments for Melissa? I don't have your written report in front of me. What's the staffing situation like these days?
We are in the process of hiring the program assistant. I hope to have an offer out this week for that, for the emergency management portion. And for 911, we have 2 vacancies, and I hope to do the request to fill those hopefully this week, if not next.
And that's in the budget for this year, right? Those
Correct.
positions?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else have questions? We're going pretty fast tonight. So everybody got a hot date later or what? I've got 2 more Zoom meetings after this, so I'm in no rush to get going. All right. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that as well.
You're welcome.
Who's up next? Marcy, medical examiner.
Good evening. Is this a better voice
Very
sound than
good.
what
Much
we
better.
had?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. All right. Glad to be back. Again, my apologies for missing the last couple meetings. 2020 for our office ended on a very busy note. November and December exceeded our average number of deaths combined by a large margin. November was about 230 without COVID deaths included in there, and December was right at that 200 mark or so. With staffing issues due to COVID and quarantining, it's been difficult at best to keep up with these numbers. But now we're in 2021, so hopefully we'll leave some of that mess behind us. Our budget actually looks pretty good. We still have some bills coming in. Like Andrea had mentioned, places that we went over were made up for in other areas that we were unable to use, like seminars and training and such. So I think overall, the budgets will be good for both Dunn and Eau Claire, or close for Eau Claire. Dunn, we still have 1 deputy medical examiner position open, so that typically makes our budget look better than it would without that. The only change, as most of you know, we cannot bill for our services only for cremation and death certificate authorizations. And in December, we started doing the cost recovery for body bags, and we will be billing the funeral homes for those in cases that they're used for their services versus medical examiner case. So we should be able to see a little bit of difference in our operations line item in 2020. So I give my annual report in February coming up here. And so some of the numbers will be broke down like other years for those that are interested in the breakdown of numbers. Otherwise, that's pretty much what I have to report to you tonight, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Anyone? Again, we're racing through these tonight. It's the winter doldrums. That's what's going on here.
All right.
Thank you, Marcy.
you.
Appreciate it. Good to see you again. I know that you've really been busy, and when you can't make meetings, we certainly understand that. So
Appreciate it very much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Who's next? Sheriff's Department. Kevin, you want to take this?
You bet. I'll try and keep with the tone of the meeting and keep this short and sweet. I submitted my written report. But the only thing to add to that would be 2 inmate positive COVID tests in our jail facility. So they've been isolated from the other inmates. So basically 2 out of a block of 10 inmates somehow contracted COVID that had been with us for a while. And so they're isolated in a 2-person cell. So other than that, things are moving right along with 2021 here. And I don't have any bad news about our budget for you yet. So I guess unless you have any questions about my submitted written report, I can turn it back over to you.
Again, I don't have that report in front of me. I'm working on a different screen here tonight. Doesn't have the room, but you have. Are there plans for vaccinating the inmates? Do you know what?
I don't know where
they'll be in, or
yeah, I don't know where they fall. My staff just started getting vaccinations the end of last week, so I don't know what category. 1B or if they're in 2 where they're at in line, but Dunn County doesn't have enough vaccines to go around for 80 inmates right now. So I'm guessing they're not, they're getting school teachers and cops and firefighters all vaccinated. So they're somewhere down the line from that. I can touch on some highlights from my written report, I guess. 2020 budget's looking good after bill pay. I have 2 staff out with work-related injuries right now. Another staff investigator out with non-work-related injury. So staffing's been a challenge the last couple months. We do have one of the patrol deputies on light duty kind of helping out with some follow-ups on the homicide from November yet, doing some investigations on that. January 20th, last Wednesday, Inauguration Day, that people were concerned about, went off pretty quietly. I did a drive-by the community service building prior to the county board meeting to make sure there wasn't Chairman Bartlett wasn't going to get mugged trying to get in the door or anything, and all was quiet there. So yeah, I think so far so good for 2021.
good. Any questions for the sheriff? Is Brenda still with us? Brenda, you want to give a jail report?
Hello. The sheriff touched on everything, and we are doing well there, monitoring our 2 that are sick, and we haven't had any new cases, so things are going well.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? All right. Child support, Josie.
All
There
right,
she is. Hi.
here I am. Okay, so I did submit a written report. We had our legal secretary started January 4th, so she's just finished her 3rd week, and I think she's doing an excellent job. We have a unpaid intern, and that's actually, she didn't start on the 18th, she started on the 20th. She's in the paralegal studies program at CVTC. And so she'll be spending some time in my office as well as clerk of courts. I gave you an update on our credit card collections. That was a new payment method that we went live with beginning of October, and we've collected over $19,000. It's hard to know if that's new money or not, if that's payments we would have not collected otherwise, or if people are just choosing this as a different way of making payments they would have made, by check or money order. But we're excited to see that people are using it, and as we get the word out, that should continue to increase. I gave you some year-end numbers on our collections for 2020. We collected $5.8 million in child support last calendar year, which was only $3,900 less than what we had collected in 2019. And being that, 10 months was in a pandemic, I'm pretty happy with that. Also, we were able to collect funds on out-of-home placements that the county pays for. So we were able to reimburse Human Services $71.5 thousand, looks like, which was an increase of over $9,000 from the prior year. I believe that's because of the first round of stimulus payments that the government passed last May were interceptable for child support debts. This new round of stimulus payments that have gone out this month are not going to be intercepted for child support. So we'll see how our numbers hold for 2021. Our first quarter, so child support runs on a fiscal year as far as performance. So our first quarter numbers are in. You can see the fun little chart that the state gives us. And in a nutshell, we're beating the state average in all measures. So that's good. COVID, we had one staff who had to quarantine due to being a close contact with a confirmed positive. That quarantine week actually coincided with her week from home, the week that she works from home. So it really didn't impact the office a whole lot, and she ultimately tested negative. So that's good. Court is still, we're not really enforcing our orders right now. On a case-by-case basis, we're going to start bringing contempt actions. And I believe those hearings are scheduled, depending on if we get service, will be in March. And we'll see what the court does if they make a contempt finding or not. As far as budget for last year, I can't really report on that until our bills are paid for December and until we get our last quarter's reimbursement from the state and feds. So I'll report back on that when I can. That's it. That's all I got.
That's all she's got, folks. Mike, question.
So when you make collections through credit cards, are you charging out 2 or 3% fee, or is it just the county absorbing that?
There is actually no cost to the county at all, which is what makes it wonderful. So what it is the child support payer runs their card, or they can also pay by electronic check. So they can put in their bank routing number, and the funds go through all paid directly to our collection site, which is the Wisconsin Support Collections Trust Fund in Milwaukee, for distribution to whomever the money is owed to. So all paid charges a fee. And depending, the larger the payment, the bigger the fee. And we were sort of wondering if people would be willing to pay that fee, but it seems like they are. So that fee doesn't come to the child support agency. It doesn't go to the custodial parent that the money is due, or to the state or anything. It's just to the credit card company for the convenience of using their service.
Okay, Mike?
Thank you. I appreciate the information.
Other questions for Josie? Okay, so don't see any. Thank you, Josie.
Thank you.
Who's next? I'm trying to scroll between my courts. That would be Katie.
Yeah, hi, good evening. So right now I've been busy finishing up the courtroom upgrades. So we're just about finished with all of the technology upgrades. We just need CCAP to come back in and do some rewiring of the courtrooms with their recording equipment, but we're just about done with that project. Court staff, they're still working remotely right now. We're going to continue to do that through February, possibly through March if necessary. We participated in a courtroom training with the Sheriff's Department just recently on Martin Luther King Day. So that was good for court staff to get exposure to just different dynamics and scenarios and how they would respond in different situations, which is good to make people start thinking if something were to happen, even if it was a heart attack or just a health emergency, how they need to respond and get help. We have an intern, as Josie had mentioned. We're sharing it with the child support agency. She'll be here about 3 days a week, so splitting time in court and with child support and between our office, doing some simple administrative tasks. The budget for 2020, I'm still waiting for a couple more invoices to come in, but for the most part, I do not see any financial issues. We should be turning over $140,000 to $160,000 from our 2020 budget back to the general fund. Other than that, things are going well at this point. I'm just busy getting the extrajudicial suite ready for our third judge and working on furniture at this time. So it's ready to get here in August when they do start. Are there any questions for me?
I don't see anything. Can you tell me about that 160,000 that's being returned to the general fund again? I'd like to hear that in January.
Yeah, well, that helps not having any jury trials or any travel time for conferences. And we did really well in our collections for 2020 overall, given the pandemic, I think. So not every year will it happen, but I was happy to see that going back.
Okay, I just didn't want people to miss that. Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome.
CJCC, I see Sarah in the bottom corner of my screen here.
Good evening. Let's see. Let's start with the budget. The budget, we're wrapping up 2020. So final bills are coming in, but things look good overall. We're also wrapping up a number of our grants as well. Personnel, continuing to do the flex from home and blending with office time. We've had some staff impacted by COVID a couple of months ago, so we know it's a real situation, and us being cross-trained and remaining flexible has been really important in that continuing of operations. Let's see, we've got, Katie touched on the grant for the upgrade on our courtroom. So that project's wrapping up. We were told by DOJ that there's going to be a second round of funding for emergency coronavirus needs related to the jail, the court operations, or law enforcement. So we're going to be in on that. That is not announced right now, but once it is, we have had a preliminary meeting and really identified some UV filtration systems for the judicial center and the jail, and then also some portable ones for our law enforcement squad cars. So some really good use of that funding right there. And then Chris is going to be talking about a resolution that's coming through here in a little bit. That's related to our CDBG grant for transitional housing. So as you may have recall, a month or so ago, we wrote a grant for a significant amount of money, $750,000, was Human Services taking the lead, but with CJCC and our partners with the Menominee Police, and the funders of that wants to go ahead with the transitional housing piece. So about $350,000 for housing, really for those folks that are coming out of jail, that are coming out of treatment, that have real housing needs that are unmet due to things are worse with COVID, and participants of our programs that really they're not able to work on those treatment needs and mental health needs when they're really looking for the basic need of housing. So we hope that it really helps all of our programs as we move forward. Let's see, we did on the CJCC front, we did have our first meeting of the year. So Chris Corpola is our new chair for a 2-year term, and Andrea Nodoff is our vice chair moving ahead. We have elected chairs for the different work groups. So we're glad to have Jim Tripp take on one of our work groups. He'll be leading up our evidence-based decision-making work group, but we're just excited to have a fresh start, a new year, and get to work on all the different goals that we have for ourselves. So I will be happy to address any questions or clarify anything.
Anybody have any questions for Sarah? Mike?
So was there a problem receiving that grant? Is that why this resolution is coming out?
No, not a problem at all. It's just the grant comes with a lot of requirements, and one of those requirements is having a use of force policy on the books. So there is one on the books on the city, so this is to get one officially on with the county. No, it's just the grant processes can be so difficult and really require a lot of steps in order to receive the money. And thankfully, we've got Chris leading that charge because there are a number of requirements that this grant is asking for. It's federal housing and urban development funding. So it's a little bit different than perhaps our state DOJ grants that are usually a little bit more streamlined for us.
Sarah, is there, and maybe Chris might want to speak to this as well, the 350,000, do you have kind of ideas on where that money might go? We talking about building an apartment building, renting hotel rooms? What do you see there?
Well, those are great ideas. And Chris, feel free to jump in here. But we've been meeting very frequently, at least once a week, up to twice a week, talking about how we're going to spend the funds. We do have 100,000 of that 350 earmarked for hotel vouchers. Another 50,000 is earmarked for case management, and then 150,000 for case or capital investment in transitional housing. So as we're talking, for the requirement, we just had to really have a thumbnail sketch of what we were looking at, and we were looking at transitional housing. So by February 22nd, we have to come back with our plan, and we've been meeting with our housing community providers out there, talking about different options. We've talked about little houses on church property. We've talked about renting commercial property, or renting a multifamily housing unit. But those take a little bit longer leg time, and there's going to be more challenges with those. Those are more of those long-term solutions. And our housing partners are really telling us that congregate housing is not the way to go as far as the future, not just with COVID and all the precautions people are taking, but it's really beyond that. It's really kind of changing. So we are still discussing different opportunities. We're talking about a potential of putting an RFP out there to see if there's some partners that want to come to Dunn County and start a transitional home. We're talking about our partners with Stepping Stones and Westcap to see their capacity to partner with us and run some of these programs, where we're more of a pass-through to an agency that actually delivers the service. But we are pleased to have the money. It does sound like a lot, 350,000, but in the big scheme of it, it's for 2 years, and it's just going to be seed money to get us started. So we want to do something that we're going to be able to continue as well. So I think that's where we are in the process. Chris, I'm going to defer to you at this time to give your perspectives.
No, I think that you've stated it well. I think that we originally wrote in our full intent to apply letter, we had requested also project management time so that we weren't doing all this legwork on our own, but we weren't funded for that. So now we're kind of recircling back and trying to figure out figure out what to do with it. The intent to apply did not require a lot of specificity as they're indicated. And so we're just trying to come up with the best plan that we can that will get us a little bit farther down the road.
Well, there's certainly a need, and it's not just with the COVID situation now. I volunteered a number of years at Winter Haven, and I didn't know there were homeless people in Menominee until I worked at Winter Haven, and then I saw them all over town. There's a lot of them.
Actually, Wednesday night is the point in time count, in which volunteers go out and try to track down people who are living in their vehicles and whatever around the community. So we'll kind of get a little bit better look at that here just even this week. Heidi Hooten from Stepping Stones did share some data just recently as we've been preparing for the full application for this grant. And when we say that, essentially the Department of Administration has said the money has been set aside for us. We just need to hop through all of those hoops in order to put together a satisfactory plan and dot the i's and cross the t's to get to that money. But Heidi forwarded some data last week, and I didn't pull it up, but basically a year in 2019, it housed say roughly 50 adults and 25 kids. These are rough numbers. And it was a total number of days in hotel stays of about 180 days. So people were staying just a few days and then moving on. In 2020, that number grew about 3 times, both the kids and the adults, and the number of night stays grew up to almost, I want to say, 1,700, between 16 and 1,700 nights. So people are staying in hotel stays a lot longer because there's not suitable, affordable, safe housing for them to move into.
Chris, I think you need to plug and unplug your headset again.
Yes, I do.
Back-to-back Zoom meetings kick me out of my microphone. Everybody needs to remind me of that.
That's more better.
Sorry.
All right, thank you, ladies. Anything else, Mike?
So I got a question on that and a follow-up on the other one. So are we going to try to use this money, that 150, for some form of affordable housing to provide some places for them to stay? Or is this more of just getting some hotel rooms for nights? Or what's the kind of the intent of how they're going to move forward with that?
So the housing world sort of speaks in multiple layers. So the most basic layer would just be what they call temporary emergency housing. Can be congregate, can now in the COVID days can be non-congregate. That would be your kind of classic homeless shelter. In this day and age, it's now hotels because it's not safe to put a bunch of people together in a small space. And so 100,000 of the $350,000 is for that temporary emergency sheltering. Then the 150 actually falls in the next category, which is called transitional housing. And those are historically up to 2-year programs where you're moving people out of that temporary housing and into a more stable situation in hopes of both like establishing a rent payment history, getting people the wraparound services that they need, whether they need employment, mental health counseling, substance use treatment, whatever they need to stabilize their own situation so that they can maintain housing going forward in the future. So we're really in that category. And then the next group would be those folks that would be moving into a permanent housing situation. And that's where a lot of like first-time home buyers and, mortgage assistance programs kind of come into play. But so we're kind of in that interim between the temporary housing and the transition. We're looking at the transition, trying to get people stabilized so that when they do move into longer term housing, they're able to keep it.
And that's where the real gap is right now, I think. I mentioned I volunteered at Winter Haven. I've also been on the Housing Authority board for several years where we've got relatively stable renters who are getting housing vouchers. But in between there's a whole group of people who very often from one night to the next or 1 week to the next don't know what their address will be. And that's a real problem because it's difficult to service that population. Because they might have lots of different needs and there's a kind of a variety of problems you have to address. So,
which is why part of the grant then request is also for that funding a case management part. It'll be a part-time position, but someone who can kind of come alongside people and identify those barriers to maintaining ongoing housing and then try to get some of those addressed so that, the goal is that you try to move people out of the system, not further into it. So.
Any other questions?
I had a follow-up.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if this is the time to discuss it, but the resolution and Sarah alluded to a policy on use of force. Is that that's not part of the actual statute that addresses the grant though, the Title 42, Chapter 69, 5304 addresses use of force, but it doesn't address anything with regards to civil rights demonstrations. So how is that tied into this grant and the resolution?
So the requirement for the requirement for the use of force and the prohibited excessive force or blocking of entrances and exits or whatever the language is related to demonstrations is a part of the CDBG requirement. Now, how and why there are literally dozens and dozens of pages of rules and requirements, but they boil them down to a list of about 15 that they require that we have in place in order to receive their money. And that was one of them.
If I can help out a little bit here, because the Housing Authority, we rely on HUD funding, so I'm vaguely familiar. And HUD has all kinds of rules attached to any money that they provide for communities, for housing and other kinds of development. And this, to me, seems, I thought this was kind of pretty standard stuff. Mike, from your perspective, I can understand now listening to you how this seems to be a little bit off the topic. We're talking about housing here. We're not talking about civil rights demonstrations, but HUD typically will attach, as Chris just said, half a dozen different stipulations before they're going to give a community any money. And this is pretty standard stuff.
Well, and I actually believe that I might be wrong, but I actually believe that this particular requirement comes from the base CDBG process. When the government is willing to give you community development block grant money, they require that you have this piece in place, because we did a CDBG loan or grant 4, 5, 6 years ago with West Cap, and this was a requirement that needed to be in place. We skated through a little bit because we gave them our use of force policy from the sheriff's department, but this time they were very specific about you had to have those two pieces. So I believe actually that that's a CDBG requirement, and then some of the other ones are combined between CDBG and HUD. But so because some are related to, I'll just read residential anti-displacement and relocation, fair housing actions, blight, some slum and blight certifications. A lot of them are that are more like specific housing related, but I believe CDBG requires us to have the use of force and the piece on nonviolent civil rights, and then it also has you have to have a resolution authorizing the application submission, which is coming through Human Services later this week to the county board in February, and you have to have an authorization or a resolution. Oh, then there's a bunch of public notice and public hearing requirements. So
If you haven't dealt with HUD before, it's kind of an adventure.
I've dealt with them a fair amount, so I understand.
Oh, sure,
I
you
did
probably
read
have.
I did read the whole 5304. I browsed through it a couple times, and then I went back and read through it. And out of that whole section, I did not at any point read anything about civil unrest or demonstrations. I did read about the use of force. So I'll bring this up when we get to the resolution, but I get a little tied up into some of these issues, and I'm questioning why we're wording it the way we are. And I wanted to bring it up now so that if there was something to do with this grant, it could be, I could get a better understanding of it now.
Well, we can certainly talk about it some more when we discuss the resolution itself.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, getting back to the CJCC report, anything else for Sarah regarding her monthly report? All right. Thanks to all the staff for those reports. We appreciate that. Now we can get back to the agenda items. The chair has nothing for the agenda today. We don't have any action to be taken. Looking at item number 8 on the agenda, resolutions for the county board. We have a couple of them, and the first being, which one is first? That's the excessive force. Let me bring that up on my screen here so I know what we're talking about. And again, you got this in your packet. Mike, I'm going to ask you first. You had some questions about the third resolved, right? Policy of Dunn County Sheriff's Office to follow laws against physically barring entrance or exit to a facility, nonviolent civil rights demonstrations. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Excuse me, though, Mike. Just let me interrupt you just for a minute. We should probably have a motion on this resolution first, and then we can talk about. That was my fault. Sorry about that. Can I get a motion to recommend this to the county board? Carl moves, and is there a second?
Jim's on second.
Jim seconds. So we have a motion and a second to adopt this or approve this and recommend it to the county board. Now, Mike, go ahead and let's talk about it a little.
So I have a couple of, I'm not disputing the policy on excessive force. That's not my point. I'm not opposed to a policy on excessive force. I support that. What I question is the nonviolent civil rights demonstration. The policy should apply to all demonstrations and all protests, not only civil rights demonstrations. And I'm confused, so I'm going to ask a question as far as, are we barring people from entering and exiting, or are we allowing them to enter and exit the buildings, I'm assuming?
I'm going to speak to this and then I'll let Chris, but the way I read it, Mike, it's the sheriff's office will follow applicable laws against physically barring entrance or exit. So we're going to follow the law that prohibits barring entrance or exit to the facility. Okay. So following state law, and I haven't looked up those laws, but the sheriff might want to weigh in here, but that's the way I read it. And then the second, or the last part of that, which is the subject of nonviolent civil rights demonstrations, I don't see that as being exclusive. I don't think the intent is that that's the only time that the sheriff's office follows applicable state and local laws. I think that that was written in to specifically bring that to the front. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
Sheriff, you look like you
So-
want to say something.
Oh, good. Sorry.
Yeah, I can weigh in on this a little bit. Mr. Rogers said it's basically an acknowledgement by the county board that I have a policy in place that follows state law. And you aren't creating county policy here. I have to create department policy, and basically all this is doing is acknowledging that I have a policy that conforms to their requirements.
I believe that
But
I
we
can
have a
shed.
lot more than that in.
Oh,
Sorry, go
so
ahead.
say, I believe I can shed a little bit more light on it. So I'm looking at so when we get this far, when we get far enough in the process, eventually Chairman Bartlett is going to need to sign a certification policy, certification of, what do they call it? Yep, certifications is what it's called. And it says certain things, include all the things that we have to have in place in order to receive this money. One of them is a policy of enforcing applicable state and local laws against physically barring entrance to or exit from a facility or a location, which is the subject of such nonviolent civil rights demonstrations within its jurisdiction. But then the very next piece of the certification is a compliance with anti-discrimination laws. And it says the grant will be conducted and administered in conformity with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then the Fair Housing Act 42 USC, which I think is the one that you read. So I think that that piece specifically related to, this is my interpretation, the piece specifically related to civil rights demonstrations probably ties back to meeting the requirements of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is 42 USG 2000 D as in dog.
USG?
USC. C, sorry, yep. 42 USC 2000 D as in dog.
And I do read here on this, the same thing that you're reading. I'm sorry, I lost my place. I apologize. The grant will be conducted and administered in conformity with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So that I still fail to see the reason that we're putting that into this resolution. That's part of a 20-page statutes that cover all of this. So why are we adding that to the resolution? and if we're gonna add it to the resolution, this resolution should cover all demonstrations, not because you're creating a resolution that's particular to one specific group.
Again, Mike, the way I read it, this is not exclusive to civil rights demonstrations. Okay, it doesn't say only civil rights demonstrations. I would assume that the sheriff's office would follow applicable state and local laws about barring entrance or exit from a building under any circumstances. Okay, and as
So
Chris,
why do we need
I
to-
think the notification regarding civil rights demonstrations probably is to meet the requirements of the Civil Rights Act. But it's not exclusive. So if we were having a demonstration against neutering dogs, I think the sheriff's department would still have to follow applicable state and local laws regarding entrance and exit to the facility. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, Jim. I'm disagreeing with the fact that we even need to list that in there because as you're saying, it's already part of the procedure.
I'm going to ask Chris where the language came from in the resolution.
So a couple different pieces. Part of it came from the sample template from the Department of Administration, and then Sheriff Biggs received 2 other county examples of their resolutions, and so it's a combination of those 2 pieces. But the name from the Department of Administration was Sample Resolution to Adopt Policy Prohibiting Excessive Use of Force and Barring Entrances and Exits for Nonviolent Civil Rights Demonstrations. So I can find it again, but I'm sure that that's exactly what it says, and it had that language.
Sheriff, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, it's been a bone of contention with sheriffs across the state because you're almost mandating a sheriff to adopt a policy. Well, we already have a use of force policy. We're required by state law to have a use of force policy. So in every county that's ever applied for this housing grant has had to go through this, and it was a topic about 6 months ago through the sheriff's group, and that's where I got some of the examples. Dodge County, Fond du Lac County, I can't even remember where all I've seen resolutions, and they basically say it's the same thing. You're acknowledging as a county board that the sheriff has a policy in place to prohibit this, just to to satisfy the grant requirements.
I have a suggestion based on a conversation, email exchange I had with Nick Lang. And my suggestion would be, I've got another very small issue with the language, but my suggestion would be that if we go ahead and pass this and recommend it, that we, before the county board meeting, check with Nick and find out what the ramifications might be if we were to delete that phrase. He might be able to have some insight into whether it's a significant and important part of the language or not. And if it is, and if Nick says, no, you can take that out, then we can talk about that at the county board meeting. Does that make anybody have heartburn?
Actually, I like that, Jim, because then I can support it, because I don't feel that last little verbiage should be in there. I think it should stop after barring the entrance and exit of the building, or barring entrance and exit is where I believe it should stop.
And if we check with Nick, he can tell us then if that reference to civil rights demonstrations is necessary or not. And then we can make a decision about, I hesitate to delete it at this point, not knowing if it might be a significant piece of language that we have to have. Okay. Now, I do have one other suggestion, and I checked with Nick, and he said this would be appropriate. In the first resolved, about in the middle, says the sheriff's office has to have a policy to prohibit the use of excessive force by its deputies against any individuals, et cetera, et cetera. And I asked Nick about the words "the deputies," because there are other people working in the sheriff's department that I think the policy would apply to as well. And he suggested that if this group approved, it would be appropriate to simply delete the words "by its deputies." And then the resolution would read, policy of the Dunn County Sheriff's Office to prohibit the use of excessive force against any individuals. And that would be my suggestion, that we make that change to delete the words "by its deputies." And if somebody would make that motion to make that change, or I can make the motion myself, I guess. As a matter of fact, I will move that we amend this in the way that I indicated. And I see Carl's got his hand up, he seconds. And I've already explained to you what my rationale is. So if there's any discussion, we can go from there.
So do you put a period after individuals, or do you continue it to the end?
I continue it to the end. The only change I would do is just remove those three words "by its deputies."
And I still contend to the same point I had with the third paragraph about the end of that sentence, so.
Yeah, and that would be the same principle. And again, if we decide to go forward with this, we can certainly get an opinion from Nick and then take it up at county board. Okay. We have a motion to delete the three words "by its deputies" from the first resolved. Is there any other discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All right, then we'll delete that. Now we're back to the main resolution. And we have a motion and a second to forward that. Carl, did you have a comment?
Well, are we wondering whether to keep in the phrase civil rights as opposed to demonstrations in general?
I think what the motion is to approve this. And I think if we do that, we still have an opportunity to amend it at county board after we've had a chance to get Nick's opinion on what that might mean for us. So other than the change of deleting the three words, right now we're back to the motion to support this resolution. Mike.
Can I make a motion to remove civil rights demonstration from paragraph 1 and from the title of the resolution?
You can make that motion. Is there a second?
I will make that motion.
Clarification.
Yeah,
You
Carl.
want to remove just civil rights, not demonstrations, right? No,
Correct.
Okay.
All demonstrations, to incorporate all.
Okay, so your motion, let me be clear too, and then we'll see if there's a second. At this point, simply removing the words "civil rights" in paragraph 1 and in paragraph 3.
And in the title.
And in the title. Yes, thank you. Okay, is there a second? Bob seconds. All right. Carl?
Are we sure that that won't affect the requirement that we have this? Is there anything in the bureaucratic requirement that says it must specify civil rights?
I can't answer that. Sheriff or Chris?
I can't answer that either. I think that's what we would need Nick to figure out or to weigh in on as to whether or not, absent that language, if it still meets the requirement of what the Department of Administration and then at a greater level, the federal government is asking of us.
Go
I
ahead.
think
Sheriff.
it basically says that you have to have a policy specific to this. But personally, I don't, if it says, such nonviolent demonstrations and take out civil rights, it says the same thing. So it should satisfy the grant, I would imagine, but I went to cop school, not be an attorney. So
is it possible to do both? And I'm just asking, and I don't have language, but could you say demonstrations including civil rights?
Mike.
Well, if Nick comes back and says you cannot process this without having civil rights in it, you could bring that up at the county board and say that the attorney has said we need to add that, and then we can have this discussion at the county board. I would prefer to have the discussion of adding civil rights as to deleting it from the conversation at the county board.
I'm going to assume that Nick has reviewed this.
He has.
Okay. Of course, that doesn't mean, that doesn't answer the question, really. Any other discussion? Carl? No? All right, we have a motion to delete the words civil rights from the title, from paragraph 1, and from paragraph 3. Does everybody understand the motion? Okay, I'm
And the
going to ask
title,
you to raise, yeah. Who,
was the title included in that as well, I think?
yeah, did I say the title and paragraph 1 and paragraph 3? Okay, I would ask you to raise your hands so that I can get an accurate count. All those in favor of the motion to delete the words civil rights from the title, from paragraph 1 and from paragraph 3, please indicate your approval by raising your hand. Oh, Jim Zahns, you're going to have to speak up.
Raising my hand.
Did you say aye, Jim?
I'm raising my hand, by the way.
Okay. Thank you. All opposed? The motion passes 5-1. We will forward the resolution. Well, we haven't voted on that yet, actually, either. We will change the language, and in the meantime, check with Nick Lang if indeed it's a required component of this resolution. As Mike indicated, we can easily add that at the board meeting. So right now we have a resolution and we have a motion that has amended the resolution. It deletes the 3 words by its deputies in paragraph 1. It deletes the words civil rights from the title, paragraph 1 and paragraph 3. Okay, are we ready to vote on the entire resolution as amended? All right, all those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Look, that was Jim Zahn's weighing in. He must be quite a ways away. It's phone's kind of slow. All right, the motion passes. Between now and the board meeting, we'll get a hold of Nick and get his opinion on it, and we'll update you at board meeting. Thank you, folks.
Do you want me to inquire of Nick and just CC you in on the each of you in on the correspondence?
Chris, if you would do that, that'd be great. Thank you so much for offering. All right. Where are we here? How come that was? We have another resolution, but I can't find it here. Oh, I know, it's different language. The other resolution is a change to the resolution that we actually passed last month. And I hope you all got the revised version of the allocation for the PSAPS grants. Everybody have a chance to look at that? On the morning of the county board meeting last week, I attended a legislative session sponsored by Wisconsin counties, and they're going in a slightly different direction with this grant money. And I thought rather than pass a resolution at county board that really wasn't very applicable anymore, we should revise it. And so if you've got the new language for the PSAPS grant resolution handy, basically, and I have to apologize for this too, I did this language change. And if you've got that handy, in the second line of the first paragraph, it says we're going to ask the state legislature to allocate $15 million. The word annually should follow that $15 million. It's an annual allocation for the 2 years of the budget that we're looking at. So the revised language should read, hereby urge the governor and the Wisconsin state legislature to allocate $15 million annually in the 21-22 budget to fund grants to the 911 centers for equipment updates through the existing police and fire protection fund. Now, in essence, the rest of this is pretty much the same resolution we passed last month, the same resolution we passed through the county board a couple of years ago, but it's more specific. It's asking for specific allocations for dollars, and it's asking for more money. Okay. Carl.
Is 21-22 1 year or 2?
It's 2.
Okay,
so we're asking for $15 million in each of those 2 years. The state does a 2-year biennial budget.
Okay, so it probably should read budgets then?
No, it's one budget, but it's for 2 years.
Oh, okay. I get you.
Yeah.
I understand.
All right. I would entertain a motion to forward this revised resolution to the county board with our recommendation. Carl moves. Is there a second? Mike seconds. Thank you. This gets kind of complicated, and if you're interested, I can forward the position papers of the Wisconsin Counties Association. One of the things is you notice that the Department of Military Affairs in here, that seems like kind of out of left field, but the Department of Military Affairs is the agency that is establishing the ESINet, Emergency Services. Melissa, I see you back on with us. Maybe you can, I'm a little at sea on this one. If I read it through carefully, I can figure it out, but I can't explain it to anybody. So the ESINet is?
Yeah, ESINet, yep, yeah. So I mean,
what does it stand for?
You're on the right track, Jim, you're doing great. So yeah, we just need the funding to assist the departments in, bringing everything up to speed, for the NG 911 and the different things that we're, working on to improve our product that we put out for, for the community. And yeah, so we need the ESINet, and it helps different facilities and helps the way that things are tracked throughout the 911 system. And basically that will lead us into NG 911. So you know, it's part of the process. It's part of the structure that we need to do. And it just helps manage, you know, the networks and things that we're going to have to put into place before we can go into the NG 911. So it's just going to help fund some of that for the state of Wisconsin so we can accomplish this.
Right. That's bottom line, you know, really that's about all a person needs to know.
Yeah.
But I want to share just one thing with you. In the 2019, the Wisconsin legislature passed what was called Act 26, and it required the Department of Military Affairs to establish rules for a grant program, okay, which they did, but they didn't give them any money. They said, you have to establish these grants, but they didn't allocate any funding for it. So part of this is simply allocating the funding. It was clear that the legislature intended to establish a grant system for people to install hardware and equipment, but then they didn't provide any funding for it. So part of this is simply to fund that Act 26 grant program. The other part of this, of course, is the 18.5 million in fiscal year 22 and 14 million in 23 for establishment and maintenance of the program. So anyway, as I said, it gets a little convoluted, but Melissa gave you the bottom line, and that is if we are going to move our 911 system into the next gen system, then we're going to need financial help, and this provides it. So we have a motion and a second on the floor to support this resolution and recommend it to the county board. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Don't hear any. Motion carries. Now I have to see if I can find my agenda again. Oh, that's not it. What do we got left? Anything? Got the wrong agenda. Who's got an agenda?
There's no other action items for the agenda.
Thank you, Katie.
That's it.
No
You'll
other
be in.
action items? Announcements?
Correct. No.
There's my agenda. I got too many documents open on my lap or on my page here. Dave.
Just so you realize, your next meeting is scheduled for the same night as the county board legislative meeting. I'm sure you'd be done in time but I just wanted to make sure everybody knew it was on the same night.
Great. Thanks for that heads up, Dave. Must be on my calendar, but I don't see it handy here anywhere. I don't think I'm going to mess with the meeting time or date for next month yet. If by some chance we have an agenda that looks like it's going to take some time, we might have to make an adjustment. Otherwise, our regular meeting time is 22nd at 4:30. Any other announcements or anything for the good of the order? Seeing nothing, I want to thank everybody for your forbearance tonight, and the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, folks. Thanks, Randy, for the IT support. Thanks, Katie, for setting up the meeting. Thanks
night,
to
all.
all the staff and the committee members. And to
Bye,
our
all.
millions of
Night.
loyal viewers, signing off and